All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Lafon, for that wonderful kickoff to our summit today. I'm super excited. Our next, well, before I jump into that, actually, let's scoot back a little bit. I just want to say that we have had this wonderful partnership with Indeed since March. And it has been one of the most amazing things that has happened to us here at Mother Honestly. We work a lot with various organizations, as you all know. But this one is super special. And one of the reasons why it's special is because Indeed really and truly walks the talk when it comes to supporting women, when it comes to supporting caregivers and families, and offering true flexibility. And we have been able to experience that in the real life, really, because a lot of the Indians that we've worked with, or even had the opportunity to connect with, share with us the different kind of flexibility that they have, where a few people are working from home permanently, a few people are, working hybrid situation. There's a lot of effort to ensure that people are actually using their benefits, that people are actually using their paid leave, paid time off. So I just want to, this is just a quick shout out to say thank you Indeed for walking the talk. This is something that we are focused on as an organization, to make sure that we are only working with companies that truly have our best interests as working mothers, working caregivers, and working professionals in mind. And so it's a great segue to bringing on my wonderful friend, Caitlin, who is the founder and CEO of Happily. And speaking of companies and organizations that are walking the talk and doing their best work and really putting the interests of employees, the interest of working families, the interest of families and caregivers in general first. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us this morning at the Level Up Summit.
Thank you so much for having me. Blessing, I'm a huge fan of all the work you're doing, and it's such a joy for us to have the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you so much. And you are going to be leading us in moderating this panel, Reclaiming Your Career Mojo, how to move past burnout into your dream job. This is one that is very important to us, obviously, because as you know, a lot of women are burning out. In fact, a lot of employees are burning out as a result of just the overwhelm that comes with caregiving. And also, a lot of the challenges that we talked about at the beginning of this summit. So I will let you kick it off with our wonderful panel for
Amazing.
our next panel.
Thank you so much, Blessing. So hi, everybody. Again, my name is Caitlin Iseler. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Happily. It's Happyly. It's an employee connection platform designed to help companies support their working parent population. And this topic is really close to my heart because I can tell you that in a former life, I was a partner in a global consulting firm, experienced that burnout, myself, danced with the serious health issues that are related to burnout, and made this huge decision to reclaim my career mojo and to build a company that hopefully supports others in doing the same. So today we have an amazing panel, and then we're really excited to introduce you to Lara and Dave, and got some really exciting things coming your way. Awesome. Hi, Lara. Hi, Dave. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I've had the joy of catching up with Lara and Dave separately. Lara is an author of Ambitious Like a Mother, an attorney, an advocate for women, and a mother of two, and just an incredibly inspiring human all around. And Dave is in an incredible leadership role with Indeed. He's a father. He's an advocate for supporting working families and creating awesome workplaces that allow you to be your best self. So I'm going to ask them to do a little bit of further introductions of who they are, their backgrounds, and why claiming this career mojo and loving what you do matters. So Lara, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is a real honor and just a pleasure. A little bit about me. I am a mother of two. I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old. I'm amicably divorced, but when I have my kids, it's the three of us, and it's pretty hardcore. At the same time, I also am a full-time law professor, and in that role, I do a variety of things. I teach my students how to be lawyers, and so we litigate real cases, and that's pretty intensive. And then because, you got to make it work, I have a bunch of different side hustles going on, and I also am a writer, and I'm excited to talk about all of these topics with everyone today because looking at the questions and sort of what's on the front burner, it's very resonant for me personally and just excited to sort of share and hear from others. So thank you.
Welcome. Dave, the floor is yours.
I'm really also honored to be here. So my name is Dave Mayell. I always start with my personal. So on a personal level, I'm a dad to two little boys who are 6 and 4 years old. One who's here today and might pop in a few moments, either happily or unhappily. I don't know. I live here in New Jersey with my family, and on a professional level, I lead learning and development for Indeed.com. So my team is also resonates with me because over my career and my background, I've had lots of ups and downs, and I've switched roles and careers quite intentionally in the past. And I certainly, from a professional working perspective, have experienced and have also helped team members and friends get through burnout. From a parenting and caregiving perspective, obviously over the past 2.5 years, dealing with COVID and all the challenges that have been thrown at our community, I've had firsthand experience working at Indeed to support that. And I also will say, and I'd happy to share previous experiences where I've had less than supportive working environments. And I learned from that, and I try to change that as I go forward at different places I've worked. So I'm happy to share those stories as we go.
Amazing. Lara, why don't you kick us off with how burnout has impacted you personally? How did you get past it, and any resources that you might recommend to the community as they're looking to take control of what's next after burnout?
Sure. I think the most extreme form of burnout I experienced was
Dave, did we lose that?
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Why don't you take the question if you don't mind while we're waiting for Lara to come back?
Yeah, no worries. I'll do my best to stall and fill the space here. But so it's funny. So I lead a training team, and obviously we do all our training virtually. So we deal with this all the time. Got to wing it, right? So burnout personally affected me in two ways. One, long time ago, I started my career on Wall Street, and I loved my paycheck and I hated my job. And after 6 years of doing that, Caitlin, you mentioned, we didn't talk about this, but you mentioned health effects and the psychological effects of what that does to you. I truly felt that. I quit. I left. I went back to school, and I told myself at that point, I'm never going to do something I don't like or I don't feel good about doing. Personal, but that's a work-only way. Over the past 2.5 years, and really ever since I became a dad 6 years ago, I think burnout and stress levels are, for me, higher than they ever were before. And part of that is from the challenges and the kind of day-to-day stress of being a parent and a caregiver and all that entails. But obviously, over the last 2 years, I think our community, just like lots of other communities, have had to deal with just an avalanche of new challenges and things to worry about. For parents and caregivers, it's obviously the health and wellness of our families, it's education, working parents or working caregivers finding balance and being able to do two things and have, two jobs, both a home life and a professional life, and find a way to integrate that, as LaFawn says. That's really hard. And I find, and I've talked about this with friends, like the more things you pile on, the more prone you are to tip over, right? It's kind of like a tower of cards. So that's been helpful for me. Like, vacations and PTO days help. Talking to someone helps. But I think the most helpful thing that I've both personally experienced and also seen through others in addressing burnout is being able to prioritize and be able to let go of things that you can't control. We have a lot of resources that are available to all of our employees, not just parents and caregivers, that focus on mental health and overall well-being. And I think that our overall leadership team, our company, supports employees doing what they need to do to find balance. And again, finding balance means a lot of different things. For one person, it might be taking a 2-week vacation. For another person, it might be getting rid of some projects or some work. And for a parent or a caregiver, it might mean working a reduced schedule or changing your schedule, or even just having a conversation with your manager about the things that you need. So those are some of the things that helped me. And I hope that's helpful to answer your question there, Caitlin.
That's really helpful. Yeah. And hopefully Lara will be able to rejoin us soon. But I'll just comment personally, what I found when I hit this burnout point is I had actually ended up having cancer growing in my body. And what I realized during that time of having to make these hard decisions and to slow down was that didn't happen overnight, right? That was a series of decisions to not take care of myself. And to not make sure you had those doctor's appointments and all these things piling up. And I think that's what you said, like there's these layers, right, of things, and then that tips it over. And when you get to this place of taking control, you start looking at what are those little micro things on an everyday basis that help you to live your best life and to be as, to take control, really. So we'll move on to the next question, Dave. What have you seen Indeed do really well in terms of supporting people if they are burnt out, or to help them come back from burnout?
Indeed is a great company to work for, the best company I've worked for. And I've worked for good companies in the past. But what Indeed does, I think that's really important, first and foremost, is we just put things out there. We put out there that communities or groups or regions or countries are dealing with things, and we make it open and on the table, and not I don't know what the right word is, but it's not a bad thing to talk about. We're struggling with this, we're worried about this, it's affecting us. I mentioned I worked on Wall Street the first 6 years of my career, and Caitlin, I'm so sorry to hear about your background and the health issues you have. Same thing for me, right? If I had a personal thing that was just bothering me, I didn't bring it forward. I couldn't. But I can at Indeed. And from a parenting perspective, dealing with COVID over the past 2.5 years, that's just a very real example. Like the fact that my work production, my output, my performance is probably going to be below average. And you know what? That's okay. Indeed also does offer quite a lot of real tangible resources to our employees. So besides the cultural, which starts at the top of our company, besides the cultural things we do offer support to all employees as part of our benefits package, which includes mental health resources, access to both live or on-demand therapists. We, through our Indeed Inclusion Resource Groups, we have 10 different communities at Indeed that are run by volunteers like me that provide resources for communities that need different things. We have a Black inclusion group, a Latinx inclusion group, obviously parents and caregivers, which is what I represent. And as things pop up, those resource groups kind of spin into action and do what those communities need. And that could be a number of things. That could be leading a webinar to allow people to listen to each other, or just to vent. We've brought in experts. So during COVID, we brought in a health and infectious disease expert that talked to parents and caregivers about the risks facing children at different points in their lives and in their vaccination statuses. So things like that we've done over the years have been really helpful, again, just to allow people to kind of be themselves and bring their authentic selves to work.
I love it. It's so inspiring. I love it. Lara, can you welcome back. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how burnout has impacted you, how you got past it, kind of how some resources that you've used to get yourself past burnout, and then anything that you're seeing in your work or in the organizations that you're part of, where companies are supporting wellness and avoiding burnout well?
Sorry. I'm hoping I can stay with you this time. So I'm going to hold on and hope for the best. So yeah, I experienced real burnout in the mid-teens when I was turning 40, and I had been commuting for about 3 years from San Francisco to LA on a weekly basis with 2 small children. And I was getting a divorce, and I got really, really sick. I just got physically and emotionally run down, and I couldn't get better. And this lasted for months. And at the end of it, I just realized that I couldn't do my job anymore as much as I loved it, because the commute was steadily killing me. And so I decided to leave my job. And I really, at that point, took a step back. I had always been someone who felt like I needed to be on a linear type of trajectory. And I realized that just wasn't working for me and for my kids. We kind of had to heal from the trauma of the divorce. And also, I just needed to regroup and kind of figure out what I was going to do next and how that was going to work with everything else that was going on. And so for the next 2 years, I really reflected deeply. I ended up writing my first book. I was helped enormously, ironically, financially, by a client of mine who I had helped to exonerate in 2013. And he won a record-setting judgment from the city and county of Los Angeles because of misconduct that had led to him being incarcerated for 34 years. And during that time, he actually gave me some money. And that was, first of all, incredibly meaningful emotionally, but also financially. And so with all of that, I was able to really regroup and kind of take the next step forward, and ultimately got the position I have now, which is a tenured position at a different university. So I've definitely experienced that. And I think one thing that's really important for people to know about burnout is that it's normal. It doesn't mean that you're a weak person or a bad person. People experience it for all different reasons in their life. I gave a few of mine, but it's specific to every person. And I think the most important thing is to not see it as the end of your career or how am I going to recover from this, but instead to see it as an opportunity to step back, reflect, and figure out how you're going to reset. So that's how I came to view those couple of years. And I would just encourage other people to think about it as sort of a silver lining rather than something that they should feel bad about or ashamed of.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think there's so many things we can all do, right, to get well so that we can go to this next transition was like, how do we reclaim our career mojo? So I'd love, Dave, if you don't mind, kick us off with how can you advocate for this career that you want once you realize, okay, I'm burnt out and I want to get back to a healthy place?
Really great point that burnout doesn't mean something's wrong. It's natural. It's part of a cycle, right? People go up and down, and so does life. How do you advocate for the career you want? Burnout or that typically also has contributed to my burnout in the past. Being demotivated or just like I'm in a rut. It's a great opportunity to A, recognize that, and B, say, okay, how do I get out of it? What are the things that excite me? And how can my company or outside some other way, find ways to get that motivation back that you have inside you. For me personally, I'm the type of person that doesn't like to do the same thing every day, and I don't like to do the same job every year or whatever. Like I like change. And when I've experienced burnout, whether it's a short-term thing or something that's been deeper, that's lasted for weeks or months, to change something. It doesn't need to be drastic, but career, that's usually meant I've had open conversations with my managers or with others at my employers. I had a great boss at one point, and I was in sales at one point in my career, and his best advice is the silliest advice, which was, it never hurts to ask. You can really never, as long as you do it properly and professionally, ask things that are going to benefit you and hopefully benefit, again, whether it's your employer or the clients you work with. It's never a bad thing, especially if it comes from a place of, a place of, I want to do this because it will help me personally succeed, but also there's positive outcomes on the back.
Awesome. Dave, sorry, do you mind disconnecting your iPod? Yeah, okay, awesome. One of the questions that's come in terms of as we think about being an advocate for your career, like any advice or recommendations for people who are thinking there's a lot of pressure to join meetings that you may not have the energy to partake in, or you might be able to not give 100%. And like, what are some ways that you might reinforce boundaries to make sure that you can show up as your best self and advocate and, take care of yourself while still, upholding your commitments, and to make sure that you're really reinforcing boundaries that people will honor?
Is that question to me?
Yes, perfect. We'll start with you and then we'll have Dave.
Okay. I think, first of all, it's really incumbent on people in a managerial position to be very thoughtful and intentional about how many meetings they are actually setting and the timing of those meetings. I mean, I think that there are a lot of meetings that, quite frankly, don't need to happen, or maybe need to happen, but with 3 people, not 10. And so I think it's really incumbent on those of us who are in a position where we're setting the agenda to really think, does this person need to be here? And do I need to have a meeting at 8:00 in the morning, for example, when it's likely that the person I'm asking to come is going to be taking their kids to school? So part of it is really on the people who have some degree of power and authority to be thoughtful. I also think that we are at this inflection point for a lot of folks because there is a scarcity in the labor market, and there are a lot of jobs that are open and not enough people to fill them. And what that means for people who are unhappy in their jobs is that they have a bargaining chip to play, which is that they can go elsewhere and likely get another position. And people know that. So it's really a question of capitalizing it and saying, I feel like there are some boundary issues and maybe too much seepage coming into my personal space. And there's certain meetings, for example, that I don't think I necessarily have to be a part of. And so I would just ask that you be mindful of that. That's just one example. And if people are unhappy, they can also bargain for different conditions, and they can walk out the door. They can vote with their feet. So I think those are just kind of 2 different ways of looking at the issue that you're presenting, from the side of the person who's being imposed upon and the side of the person who's making the imposition perhaps unnecessarily.
Awesome. Dave, I know you're a big advocate for communication and like setting clear boundaries and really like making sure that if it's something you need is not present in your work environment, being the force that makes that happen. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. First off, can you hear me better?
We can hear you better. This is
Sorry
great.
about that. Yeah. I think it takes bravery and courage to say what sometimes, like Lara said, say that I need this to succeed in my work or personal life. That takes bravery and courage, but it's 2022, right? And we've all been trapped in homes for the last year, 2 years, whatever. Everybody understands that now. And if your manager, if your employer doesn't understand that, that's probably a bad sign, culturally, right? So that's maybe just point one is for anybody listening, having bravery and the courage to step up and say, this is what I need. I think you have to get over that hump as bluntly as I can say that. The second piece of that is, how do you advocate for the things you need? And to answer your question more discreetly, use examples, use stories, and be personal. We've seen that at Indeed work very well. Over at Indeed, we shut our offices down 2.5 years ago, and we, for the last 12, 18 months, have continually delayed reopening our offices. And one of the reasons we keep delaying that is because we encourage our employees and our managers to share stories of what they think. We literally survey people, but we also take personal stories up. And an example of that is we were about to open our offices in July for 2 days a week. Parents and caregivers pretty unanimously opposed that. And my IRG, our resource group, we gathered a few anecdotal personal stories. We took those to our leadership team and said, look, this one employee shared one example of how difficult it's going to be to find childcare for the 2 days a week that you want to open the office. And there's probably another dozen examples of that. Be personal, take those stories forward. Again, that takes bravery and courage, but I don't think there's any negative that comes from it. empathy is something that all leadership roles, whether it's your line leader or the C-suite of your company, whoever you work for, empathy is so important, especially today, where the lines between professional and personal life are really, really blurred, and they should be blurred, go on for forever. But I think having the ability to say, this is a personal thing for me, it's like you said, it seeps into my professional life, and
Yeah.
here's what I need, or here's how I'd like to address this, or here's my idea. That's really, really important to do.
Absolutely. One of the questions that just came in, which I think is really fantastic, is what did you have to unlearn or stop doing that helped you to grow? And I'll just share my personal is that like I always say yes because I want everybody to be happy, and I have had to learn how to say no and not feel bad about it. Lara, Dave, how about you? What's worked well for you?
Caitlin, you stole mine.
Sorry.
It's fine, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think as women, we're socialized to say yes. We're socialized to be accommodating. We're socialized to say that we can do it all and be all things to all people. And it's not true. And it's not conducive to being happy. I think it ends up making you feel overburdened and resentful. And no is actually very empowering. I think the other thing I'll say about no is that sometimes, especially women, feel like they have to say yes to everything because they're worried that if they don't, they'll never get that opportunity again. And I have actually found that no's to potentially lead to more opportunities because it makes you a scarcer and more sought after commodity, which seems counterintuitive, but I've definitely found that to be true. So I would just encourage everyone to really lean hard into, no, this isn't going to work for me, or no, you're not offering me enough compensation, or no, but I could do it at this other time that works better for me. I think that's the thing that I've had to unlearn, rather than just reflexively feeling grateful for every opportunity and feeling like I have to take it.
I'll just add quickly. I love that. For me, it's been perfection. It's impossible to be perfect, right? But I have always tried, and I've always had team members and people that report to me that strive for perfection and really get disappointed when things go wrong. But it's impossible to be perfect, and it's impossible to be perfect with all the things that we've talked about that are also weighing on our shoulders. So pretty good is good enough, and no one's seeking perfection because it's impossible. So that's the one thing I've unlearned, and that leads to being kinder to yourself, and just being more forgiving and cutting yourself slack. And as a manager, as a leader, that's something that I typically reiterate and repeat to my team. And I think it makes a difference because perfection's impossible. So that's the one thing I've unlearned.
So true. Well, guys, we're already at our last question, which is crazy. Time flies when you're having fun. Lara, if you want to start us off, but how do you think about reclaiming your career mojo if you've lost it? And then thinking about the options of, can I get that back in my current role, in my current company, or do I need to go somewhere else to do it? And how do I do the work to make sure that that's all possible?
I think especially right now, we're facing so many daunting headlines. And if you look at sort of the national picture of what's going on in this country, whether it's school shootings or rights being rolled back at a national level or inflation, take the issue, the war in Afghanistan, it's just very easy to wake up and feel kind of desperate and hopeless and like, what is the point? And so when I feel like that, the way that I sort of reclaim my mojo in that moment is I think, okay, but in my sphere of influence, albeit small, what can I do in my local community to make a difference? What can I do for my law students? What can I do for my clients? And I find that when I kind of put my head down and focus on my own lane and what I'm doing, it's easier for me to have the sense of mojo and inspiration that is necessary to kind of keep forging ahead. So I think that part of it is really important, that when sometimes you lift your head up and you look at the 30,000 foot view, it just feels so daunting and overwhelming. And the best thing to do is really narrow the lens and think like, okay, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things I can do today to have a joyful moment with my family, or really push this project forward in some meaningful way, or even just reconnect with a friend. And I think if you focus on that, I think of it as a local lens, it is easier, at least for me, to reclaim my mojo and energy.
Awesome. Thank you. Dave?
I'm a big list maker, so I'm making a list, right? And I'm doing that right now too. But for me, it's plus one to Lara's point that it's important to recognize what's good in a world where you're hit and inundated with things that are not good all the time. But two, I think it's, and I've had career conversations with my team, and I've also had managers have this conversation with me. Thinking about what excites you, what energizes you. To go back to our earlier comment around addressing burnout, that also is really helpful for thinking about what do I do with my career, what path do I choose, what role or opportunities do I take, and I mean that personally and professionally, right? If I need or want a job that allows me to have more flexibility and or more time with my children or the people I caregive for, that should be a factor in figuring out what type of things, roles, jobs, opportunities I look at. Or vice versa, it could be on the work side. If I like working with clients, if I like working with analytics, if I like working, behind the scenes, or a set schedule or a flexible schedule, those things matter, and they should be, pro con lists or unlike lists. They help me a lot in thinking about, do I stay on this path? Do I look for something new? Is it time to make a big change? So that's my most tactical advice. But I think, again, the biggest conversation, and Caitlin, you started it with this, is stepping back and recognizing where you are. Maybe you are burnt out. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're unhappy. Maybe you're unmotivated, whatever. Having that recognition in that cognitive moment, and then being able to say, I think I can address it, and not give into the spiral of bad news, or the spiral of negative self-talk. That's super important to get out of that.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not an overnight fix, right? Like, it took me 2 years to leave my corporate job, which I loved and gave me a lot of great gifts, to be able to dream up this idea of doing something really different. And I think sometimes giving yourself a little bit of grace in the process is important as well. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the time with Lara and Dave today. And if I can be a resource to anybody as you're thinking about what's next and reclaiming your career mojo, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and love to support you on your journey.
Thank you so much for having